Let's get on with the details now. At the shopping malls, school, law courts, banks and other places where many convert to access a particular item of value or service, it is common to hear phrases such as first come, first served. The early bird catches the worm. They usually used to promote fairness and organize public to avoid chaotic situations. While in emergency cases, those who came last may be served ahead of those who came before them. How so? Matilda Wamega looks for answers in this Joy News Health Desk special report.
At every point in time, whether morning, afternoon or night, there's a critically ill patient requiring more than the normal interventions from the emergency services staff to stay alive. Similar to a busy restaurant, if it's packed, there's going to be a longer wait line. Unlike a walk-in, an emergency room is not a first-come, first-served place. Emergency department professionals have to determine the severity of a patient's ailment and recognize if they need medical attention urgently, and they do this with a process called triage, which simply means to sort. This process is what sometimes accounts for the long wait in the emergency room, leaving people frustrated and angry at health professionals. Emergency physician at the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, Dr. Nani says, whilst waiting for medical attention may seem tedious, it is important for people to understand the process.
The reality of the situation is whenever you arrive in the hospital, you are not the only person to be taken care of. When it comes to emergencies, every second is of utmost importance. Every second counts. A patient will lose a life if care is delayed for a while. So what we do in the emergency room is not about first come, first served. We have a formal triaging system that we use, which helps us to tell whose illness is more severe than the other, so that we can take care of the more severely ill people before we get to the less ill people. So yes, that to some extent brings dissatisfaction for those who are less ill, but then in the long run, it actually brings the most good for the most people, in that at the end of the day, we get to save the most lives. And because sometimes the communication may not be as good as it should be, the understanding isn't there. I think the other thing we may have to improve is the communication with our patients, so they understand that it's not about first come, first served, but whose illness needs the most urgent attention.
But the procedure from pre-hospital care through to the emergency room can be daunting, with lots of possible outcomes running through your mind. At the moment, the country has between 50 and 60 functional ambulances. The widening gap for pre-hospital care, transportation through to the emergency room, where the no-bed syndrome continues to claim lives, remains a big issue in the health sector. At the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, a department is dedicated to emergencies. Dr. Emmanuel Srohwenyo is a medical director.
We have put in place a series of strategies. One of them is to set up what we call bed management committee. And so this is a team of doctors, nurses, and administrators. And then their job is to go around the hospital or the walls and make sure that wherever there is bed, they mark it, that there is a bed here. And then when the emergency department is getting full, then patients are transferred to those places so that at all times we have bed at the emergency department. Another strategy we put in place is what we call functional usage of bed. You know that in the past there are some departments that may be busier, or sometimes their patients stay longer. For example, the medical department, the patients tend to stay longer because these are elderly people who may have stroke and the rest, so they don't go home, compared to some other department that they come for surgery, your surgery is done, you go. So sometimes there are beds in some department and there may not be beds in another department.
CEO of the Ghana Ambulance Service, Dr. Ahmed Zakaria, says whilst the service awaits to take delivery of the 270 ambulances promised by government next year, there is an urgent need for schools to train people in basic first aid.
We can bridge the gap by training what we call volunteers and first responders within the communities. You know, if you go to many developed countries, every average person within the community is trained in basic life support skills. So when that happens, even in the house, the individual is able to start some first aid before they send for the emergency services to arrive. So we should be able to get into the communities, target the communities, the drivers, the schools. But I would even recommend that we catch them young, and therefore we should be able to include in our curricula first aid training. So that once we know that every child is trained in some basic life support, the child grows with it.
Meanwhile, the Greater Accra Regional Hospital has taken delivery of advanced support ambulance with equipment and medications on board to deal with emergencies. For Joy News, Matilda Pumaga, Accra.
You're welcome back to the show. Many thanks for staying with us. Now, well, the country is we're looking at emergency systems and how we respond to emergency systems. I have two persons in the studio here with me for that discussion. Dr. Emmanuel Ahiable is an emergency medicine specialist with the Greater Accra region, what you usually call the Ridge Hospital, Greater Accra Region Hospital, which is the Ridge Hospital. Dr. Ahiable, you're welcome.
Thank you, madam.
And thank you very much for your time. Also here in the studio with me is Dr. Edem Komla Nani. He's also an emergency medicine specialist, the same hospital, that's the Greater Accra Region Hospital, also, or Ridge Hospital if you like. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
So we understand that you're at the hospital, you're celebrating or commemorating, I should say, emergency health. Is this correct?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's true, Ridge Hospital or Greater Accra Regional Hospital is celebrating a week-long emergency week to acknowledge hardworking staff and also create awareness about what happens at the emergency department at the Ridge Greater Accra Regional Hospital. It's true.
Okay, so what are the things you're doing at the hospital to commemorate this day?
Yeah, at this week-long activity, we started on Monday, which was the inauguration activity, where important dignitaries like the Director General of Ghana Health Service, whose representative was Dr. Samuel Kaba, Director, CEO, National Ambulance Services, Professor Zakaria, and the Medical Director of the Ridge Greater Accra Regional Hospital was also present, and other stakeholders, the donors. At that stage, you know, the medical director, you know, assured or acknowledged staff, the doctors, the nurses, paramedics who work at the department, acknowledge them for the hard work they have been doing so far. The hospital emergency department has been in the existence since 5th June 2007, the last year. So basically about a year now that the department has been in existence. It's barely a new department because before that, Greater Accra Regional Hospital didn't have emergency medicine department. So he acknowledged them and asked the public to, you know, to help, and donors to also help to, you know, create awareness so that services will be known to what the public.
I have a question. I mean, I've heard all that you've said, but it doesn't feel people-centered, the commemoration. And I'm wondering, because people have raised concerns about how we respond to emergency services especially, and I'm wondering how the commemoration this week is targeting the response or targeting the people, whether or not you're taking on board their concerns about how you respond at the hospital, for example, to emergencies. Is there any parts of the program where you get to hear the people what their expectations are as far as your response to emergency service is concerned?
Exactly, it's part of the week-long program. Today was to be an open day for patients who have received services from our place to give testimonies about what services they've received from our department or the good things they've received and the bad things.
So what did they say?
Like I said, you know, it's ongoing. Before we came here, they were still on there, so I cannot tell you what they are saying now.
Let's look at the bigger picture, and let me come to you, Dr. Nani, right? Yes. Okay, let me come to you. Not long ago, there were concerns about how a 70-year-old man had to die because they had been to several hospitals. They had been to about 7 hospitals, and there was no bed. How, now that you're commemorating this day, if you look at the bigger picture, how have we been able to deal with this story? It's been like a couple of months on. Would you say that the situation, for example, at the Ridge Hospital or the Accra, Greater Accra Regional Hospital has improved? To what extent and how?
Right. Thank you very much for this question. I would say there's been significant improvement in the emergency situation since this particular story broke out.
Okay.
Actually, we as a department took the opportunity to write on the back of the story to make significant reforms.
Okay, tell us about the reforms.
Okay, so first of all, we examined ourselves as a health facility. In any case, even before that, when we looked at the situation, we realized there are factors that go beyond the hospital, and then there are factors in-house.
Okay.
The in-house factors are the ones that are directly under our control, so we went into that. The investigations brought up a number of things. First of all, we realized that the situation of no bed in itself does not necessarily mean every bed in the hospital is actually full. It just means the emergency room is full. And a number of things were to blame.
So which means that there were beds, or even when they say no beds, there's a possibility that there are other beds in other departments.
Yes, there's always that possibility. The no bed syndrome, as people put it, just means the emergency room in itself is full.
Okay.
But then it being full does not necessarily mean the whole hospital is full. Practically, in our facility, what we found out was at certain times, patients' profiles were skewed in a certain direction. For example,
what does that mean? Yeah.
Let's say there are 4 large wards. We have the medical ward, which in itself is male and female sides. We have the surgical ward. We have the ONG ward, that's for pregnant or pregnancy-related wards, and then the children's wards. So if at a given time, say all the beds, just giving you arbitrary figures, say all the wards have 50 bed capacities, and then you have a situation where the male side of the ward alone has all 50 patients there, but say there are about 30 female patients on the ward. And we are unfortunate. What that means is anytime we have patients coming into the emergency, if they are females, they could probably go to the female side. But if there are still more male medical patients reporting, that means because there's no space where they were actually supposed to go, then these patients are hoarded in the emergency room waiting for space up there in the male medical ward.
Wow.
Right. So what we realized was it was a problem of inefficiency in our bed usage. So what we've done currently is that we have this mantra of the emergency room is not full until the whole hospital, every bed in the hospital is actually full.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter where the bed is, whether it's on the female medical side. If we have more male patients, we could actually utilize part of it to make space for such patients. So I must say, since this whole situation, since this reform came into being, we've barely had to refer patients outside.
Okay, so what it means is that if what it means that there's nobody can be turned away because the emergency ward is full, or there are no beds at the emergency ward.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what it means. But then there are still a few facets here
that you need to add. Just hold on for me briefly. Let me acknowledge the presence of Professor Ahmed Zakaria, who is the CEO of the Ghana Ambulance Service, who has also joined us on the line. Sir, thank you very much for your time this afternoon here on the Pulse.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'll take your thoughts briefly on where we are at the moment, the current status of our ambulance service. But let me allow Dr. Nani to finish up the point he wanted to make quickly.
Right. So,
you said that there are various other sides to the reforms that you have introduced.
Yes. The emergency room may temporarily, maybe briefly, for like an hour or 2 before.
Okay.
If there are problems with anything on the chain between patient moving from the emergency room up to the ward.
Okay.
That doesn't mean patients will be turned away, because we know there are spaces up there where patients could be moved.
Okay.
At that particular point that the patient is coming through, there may be no beds, but then we know within a few hours we could create beds for them. So
Okay.
they may be nursed until the actual spaces are created in emergency room.
Okay, okay. When I come back, I finish with Dr. Zakaria. We'll also talk about communication, which is something you mentioned in that interview that you granted Matilda earlier, about how you can communicate and explain. Because when people come to hospital, sometimes it's the way they're spoken to. Sometimes it's the understanding they get that everything is going to be all right. So we'll look at the communication and how you think that, how you've improved upon it and how we can actually improve upon it going forward. But Professor Zakaria, what is the status of the Ghana Ambulance Service at the moment? It's been a while since we spoke about it.
Okay, so let me take you and explain to you how the establishment works so that we can really put the discussion in perspective.
Very well.
Now, if you realize that as a country, we really didn't have a nationwide, well-organized emergency medical service system outside the hospital, okay. What we call the EMS, Emergency Medical Service, until 2004. And so since then, in 2004, we started with just a pilot project of just 7 stations across the whole country. Okay. Then from there, we scaled up over the years to 130 across the country. And so the idea is to make sure that every district also has the services. Now, currently, we are doing 130 stations across the country. Okay. And so as far as the establishment is concerned, when it comes to the stations, now the country has 130. The other
130 ambulances?
Pardon?
You said now the country has 130 ambulances?
No, 130 stations.
Stations, okay.
Yes, 130. Initially, we just had only 7 in 3 regions. Now, across the country, we have 130 stations. Okay. Now, the other thing we need to also mention as far as our emergency response system in the country is concerned is the fact that we didn't have a training center for paramedics. But now we have the only one in West Africa, which is the the paramedic and emergency service training in King Council in Ashanti region. Okay. So that also gives us the opportunity to train the paramedics and other health personnel as far as emergency services are concerned. Now, the challenge, as you are aware, over the years or over the past couple of weeks, has to do with the inadequate fleet. And normally, we had 160 about 8 years ago. And if you look at it, by the system, at the end of 5 years, we should have had new vehicles to augment the fleet. In that case, it will replace the weak ones, and then the weak ones will be withdrawn so that they can perform other services apart from emergency. Unfortunately, we have some challenges as far as the procurement of the last 200 were concerned. Now, the good news is that currently the government is trying to procure 275 for the 275 constituencies under the one constituency, one ambulance project. That has really advanced as far as the procurement process is concerned. And so when that comes, 2 things will happen. 1, they augment the fleet. 2, it will also help us open more ambulance stations. And 3, it will also help us improve the response time. So as far as the ambulance service is concerned, that is what is happening now. Interesting.
So if I understand you properly, we have 130 ambulance stations, which is an improvement on what used to exist.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, we've also set up a training, if you like, a training center for paramedics.
Yes, please.
Okay, which is something that didn't exist in the past.
Yeah, it didn't exist in the past. Yes.
Okay, and this is only in the Ashanti region.
No, the only one in West Africa.
Oh, the only one in West Africa, and it happens to be in the Ashanti region.
Yes, in King Council.
Okay. Now, you spoke about procurement for about 200 ambulances, and you said you were having some challenges with it. What are the challenges?
If you have followed the story, which was extensively discussed in your outfit, you realize that the first 30 arrived and there were challenges with them, if you remember.
Yeah.
And that was what brought to a halt continuation of the project, and the other 170 were not procured. Okay. And so currently, that is where we are with them. So that's one, actually, as you are aware, it's a long story. And so we rather prefer to concentrate on the discussion of the 275 that virtually are likely to come much faster than the solution to the 200.
Okay, so the other one that had the problem, do we have the money coming back, or which will help with the procurement of the 275 you mentioned?
Because that one is under investigation, I really constrained in terms of authority to discuss it, and so I would prefer. I'm spared on that because it's a case under investigation by Yoko.
Very well, very well. So there's 275 that are being procured at the moment by this government.
Yes, please, under the Ministry of Special Initiatives.
How far are we with that?
I do know that they are in the procurement process now.
Where in the procurement process, if you know?
I'm sure they are about going into the tender process.
About going into the tender process?
Yes, please.
You don't sound quite sure, Prof.
Because
have you been involved in this purchase? Because that will be the most common sense thing to do if you ask me.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. Because normally yesterday there was a meeting to discuss the procurement process, and so they are going to now discuss the restrictive tendering process because of the agency involved.
Right. So do you have an idea? Have they given you an idea how soon? Is there a target, you know, as far as...
Yes, the target is at least first quarter of next year.
First quarter of next year?
Yes, please.
Okay. And to what extent will this improve? You know, it means that when this comes, it means that every constituency will have one ambulance. Is that so?
Absolutely, and that will really help a lot.
Okay. Okay. At the moment, what would you say is your biggest challenge?
Yes, our biggest challenge, one is the inadequate fleet, and the second is the lack of dedicated source of funding, because we also depend on the normal Ministry of Health budget allocation, and that also, because of the erratic nature of the inflow, tends to affect our activity.
And ideally, what should we have beyond this 275?
And for best practices, you should have a dedicated source of funding, either through a national insurance scheme or through private insurance scheme or through some funding arrangement that is constant and reliable. Okay.
Well, I won't take too much of your time, Prof. First quarter of 2019, you say 275 ambulances. And I believe that a lot of Ghanaians can just wait for an improved ambulance service. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
You're most welcome.
Here on the show. Professor Zakaria there, he's the CEO of the Ghana Ambulance Service. They're taking us through what the state of the Ghana Ambulance Service is at the moment. He says we have 130 stations as we speak. They set up a training for paramedics. We're expecting 275 more ambulances. That should happen, or that should come in the first quarter of 2019. Well, we all know how ambulance purchase has been here in the past. Hopefully this won't be like that. But let's come back to the studio and continue with the discussion. Your work is connected to the ambulance service directly. What you heard Professor Zakaria say, what are your thoughts on it? How do you evaluate the details of that he's giving us concerning the ambulance service?
Yes, I heard what Prof said about the pre-hospital difficulties they're having with the fleets of ambulances. If you come to our hospital, majority of patients come to the hospital by their own means, either by taxis or by trucks or whatever means they come with. Ideally, our hospital being a referral hospital in the Greater Accra region, we should be, referred in a decent, means of transport, such as ambulances with a trained personnel.
Do you have your own ambulances at the hospital?
Yes, as part of our celebration, we just inaugurated a new ambulance which was given to the hospital as part of the package.
How many of them?
Only one ambulance.
Only one?
Yes.
Okay.
The ambulance. So we try to equip it so that to meet a standard of advanced life support stuff, ambulances, which can also go and pick
But
people.
ideally, how many ambulances should a hospital the size of yours have?
Oh,
one is okay?
With the presence of the National Ambulance Services, which we have a station at Ridge Hospital.
Okay.
So we don't actually need, but we have that one as a backup.
Just a backup.
In case, yes.
Okay, so it sounds good. Let's come back to communication, Dr. Nani. You mentioned the communication in the conversation that you had with Matilda earlier. It is one of the big deals because sometimes when people are ill, it takes a nice nurse, for example. It takes a nice communication, even though they may not have the relief that they require, that will help them. But for me to wait in a queue and allow someone who just came in to access health care, that's quite painful to take, especially when I'm sick. So what is the strategy that you put together in dealing with that?
Right. Thank you. This is a very big issue in the emergency room. Emergencies, by their very nature, usually come with a lot of anxiety, either on the part of the patient and even their relatives. We in the emergency room, as the health workers in ourselves, work under a lot of pressure, and that in itself also contributes to it. Patients come from all walks of life, and usually they come with different expectations. So what we notice is different people come with different expectations, and so their needs with respect to what needs to be communicated with them is a little different. More often than not, you realize that no matter the quality of care you give to the person, if they are not spoken to in a good manner for them to feel they are at home, they don't feel satisfied with the service. Yes, but
so how are you dealing with it?
It's still communication. As
are
much
there
as
any
we
new systems, you know, that you put in place?
Well, I think Dr.
You want to come in? Okay.
Yes, as you said, communication is a major issue. I mean, not even in healthcare system alone.
That is established.
Yes,
now, what we're looking at is what are the interventions? I mean, what are they?
There has been a number of interventions since that incident happened. You know, now our medical officers are supposed to do brief ward rounds when they go to work, making sure that all patients who need to be transferred or be moved to other wards are done appropriately.
Okay.
You know, since emergency medicine is a new system, department is a new system, people, the awareness, like that's why we are celebrating the week. The awareness is not there, so we are training our doctors to do the right thing at the right time. So as a doctor on duty, you have to make sure that patients are moved from the emergency department to other wards, like he mentioned, because the emergency department being full does not mean that the hospital is full.
Right.
That day in question, we were told that there were some beds, other ways. Yeah. So
he died a needless death, I would say.
So the system failure, which brought about all these things. And
hopefully we're working to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I'm going to take your very final words on this. That going forward, I mean, it looks to me like the Accra, Greater Accra Regional Hospital is pretty set. I mean, you don't seem to have a lot of challenges there. Oh, there we go. Okay.
No, so challenges, we do have challenges.
You do have challenges.
Yes, we do have challenges. But we are trying to always, be ahead. Yes.
Which is what I was coming to. What I was coming to is how, moving forward, what should people who are coming to access healthcare at your facility expect? What should people expect? And that's just for your hospital. But in the bigger, looking at the bigger picture, what do you want to see as health professionals in the emergency, service?
In the first place, when you enter the emergency department at Ridge Hospital, you are sorted out. I mean, triaged according to the colors we have. Okay. We have green, we have yellow, we have orange, we have red, and we have blue patients. Of course, patients who pass. So you are seen according to the colors that are given to you.
Okay.
If, for example,
and it depends on the severity of your problem.
If I triage red, you should be seen immediately. So you'll be seen ahead of somebody who is triaged green or came before you.
Okay.
So this is what we want to drum to the people to understand.
Now, when you come to the Rich Hospital, is this only the Rich Hospital or other hospitals do that?
In fact, that's the South African triage scale that has been adopted by Ghana Health Service, the Ministry of Health.
So when you go to a hospital with an emergency, with an emergency, and you're giving a color, a particular color will be given.
Your vitals are taken. Your blood pressure, your temperature, your pulse, a lot of about 6 parameters are measured. Then you put on a scale. That will give you a color code. So if you are red, you are seen immediately. No red patient is left unseen immediately. But the green patients can wait until the 60 minutes. A green patient can be seen after 60 minutes. All the colors have the time indicators allotted to them. So I think that was the communication we're trying to improve, so the patients understand what each color means. And when you are waiting, it's not that doctor doesn't want to see you, because your case, according to the parameters, wait a little bit. Let's see somebody.
You can wait for a while. But the person who is on red cannot wait.
Cannot wait.
Cannot wait. And I hope that you really understand this, so that when you go to the hospital, you can psych yourself to wait, and then you can make life easier for the health professionals as well, as they get on with their work. But people expect the best. When they come to the hospital, they only expect the best. Now, I want to find out from you. Let me take this from you, Dr. Nani. What do you expect to see? You work in the system. You understand the challenges. Sometimes you really want to help, but you don't have what is required to help. What do you expect to see going forward, generally, not just at RAGE, in Ghana's emergency healthcare delivery?
Right. We do this every day of our lives because we have the passion for it. It's our biggest vision that come the next 10, 15 years, at least Ghana will be counted among the countries with the best emergency services.
And that means what?
We need patients come to the emergency room. Things are done as should be done professionally, and then we want to see them satisfied with the service that was rendered to them. We want to reduce needless deaths attributable to system failures like happened some time ago. So we want to see things in place. And moving forward, yes, we are putting in place reforms, but we are just one hospital, and we can do what we can in our hospital. We wish others will follow our steps and then let us go across the country.
So, well, at the RAGE Hospital, they've introduced a few measures that's helping them deal with the problem. So, for example, when it comes to availability of beds, they're making beds, especially for at the emergency ward, they're saying that there is no bed until there is absolutely no bed in the entire hospital. I mean, this is something that other hospitals, if they have not yet, adopted, can adopt, especially following what happened. They're also saying that this color code system, then he says that it's been adopted by the Ghana Health Service. So I believe that most hospitals do have it. But hopefully, as we go along, people will have access to better emergency health care, because emergency is an emergency. Anyway, thank you very much, doctors, for coming. We really appreciate your time. Dr. Emmanuel Ahiable is an emergency medicine specialist for the Greater Accra Region Hospital, also RAGE Hospital. So thank you once again. Dr. Edem Komla Nani is also an emergency medicine specialist at the same hospital. And we've been here talking about emergency healthcare delivery. They want you to understand when you come to RAGE Hospital on emergency that you're going to be given a color code, and that will determine when the doctor will see you. Be patient. When it's your time, you certainly get the attention.